Your boss might be hoping you quit because it's easier and cheaper than firing you. Tech layoffs shock young workers. The older people, not so much. The industry's recent cuts have been awakening for a generation of workers who have never experienced a cyclical crash. Layoffs at tech giants reverse small part of pandemic hiring spree. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I want to do some more follow-up on the layoffs over at Google and go through some of your comments. There's a lot of interesting things to talk about with this stuff. You can see here first, when you look at Google, Amazon, and Microsoft, it's a total of 40,000 jobs lost. This is actually a chart here, and you can see Amazon actually has still a very large workforce. I mean, at the moment, it looks like employees at time of layoff, 1.5 million. They've only laid off, say, like 1.2% of their workers. You can say Alphabet, Google, they're laying off about 6.4%, Meta, 12.6%, and Microsoft, 4.9%. One of the things that I want to sort of talk about it with you as well is sort of why these things are happening. I think there's a couple things, and I was just thinking about this. One, with the pandemic, there was an acceleration to remote work. And essentially, right, you don't have to go to the office anymore. And I think this created a couple things. So one would be departments were sort of thinking about how to reorganize essentially their work structures, and they realize, oh my God, maybe we don't need so many people. The other thing is too, when we're accelerating to remote work, I think it made it easier essentially to send jobs overseas, right? I'm sure you guys understand this kind of thing, because if you're not going to go into the office, say in Seattle, then you could hire someone from anywhere, right? Be it Singapore, be it Jakarta, be it Sydney, any number of places. The other thing too, which I think is also going on, is both the rise of AI and automation. I mentioned several times on the channel. I just want to make it really clear again, because a lot of times people start to blame themselves, but sometimes, it's not necessarily your fault per se. It's just the market conditions are changing, and I'm talking about the job market, right? So, the other word you're going to be hearing a lot probably going down the road is redundant, meaning that maybe, we have workers that do the same thing, and you don't need it anymore because of AI and automation. Another thing which you guys probably know as well, where we talk about the economy and the Fed, is the change of interest rates. So for a long time, there was a hiring boom, essentially. Tech companies were growing, right, because their interest rate was essentially 0%. Now we're looking at upwards of, say, 5%. I don't know if it's going to go as high as 6%, but the projections are essentially interest rates will go up and then be elevated for quite some time. And this essentially slows business activity, and things are starting to cool off. And companies essentially then figure out ways to cut costs. Related to cutting costs, which is sort of an emblematic of the whole industry everywhere, is the slowing of advertising. This really, really affects Google and places like Meta/Facebook, because essentially, and someone's writing a comment, is that Google's an advertising company, which I agree with, right? I do stuff on YouTube, right? YouTube is ads, these sort of things, the same way that Meta or even Instagram, which is also Meta, but I mean, these kind of companies, that's where they make their money. And when usually when companies start to cut budgets, ads are one of the first things that go. Also, too, advertising represents whether or not consumers have money to spend, right? Because you're advertising to a group that wants to spend. So it's not like advertising is going to end completely or entirely. It's just that the budgets will be going down. So these are sort of the reasons why we're having a slowdown and layoffs. Just wanted to lay it out for you guys really clearly. Want to go through some comments. I always appreciate feedback from the community, and it's good to share these things with you, with everyone else, everyone's thoughts. So this is someone saying, Tinet Snafu is saying, Google still is essentially an advertising company, which I agree, we just talked about. All the big tech waffle boils down to finding more effective ways to serve ads to help other people sell stuff nobody really needs. Same goes for Meta. Advertising is almost all it is. In the light, the number of people they employ is arbitrary. It shouldn't be hard for ex-employees to find other jobs. He's saying, at a personal level, I always found their over-enthusiastic employee videos a bit too much. Working at Google, it seems, was meant to be a big part of the identity of their workers. If you subscribe to this, being laid off is much harder because you are stripped of parts of your identity, and there is nothing you can do. After all, in such big corporations, even the best workers end up only being a statistic, which is true, yes. Unfortunately, the big companies, yes, you are just a number. It's a real thing. There's plenty of good jobs out there in companies no one has heard of yet. who are still who are highly successful in what they are doing. So thank you for commenting, and I want you guys to just hear these things because I do agree there are other jobs out there other than tech, because essentially tech is going to be slowed down, and I can't tell you when it's going to come back. Government has jobs. They can always use good people, and as well as some of the legacy industries, which other people have talked about in the comments also. Here's someone else. This is from Wayne. He's saying, my company has been on the phone with Google HR all day, trying to get some of the affected employees. We would love to hire them. The package is very generous. The package that we're talking about is Google's severance package is very good. And it's interesting because, as I mentioned before on the channel, in my opinion, likely many of the Google workers are some of the most sought after workers in the country and the highly skilled. So they're most likely these people are going to go somewhere. And when you put Google on your resume, you guys know it's good. But it's interesting to see people's comments on this. Here's someone else is writing, here in Costa Rica, Amazon laid off 2,000 people. So due to the population size compared to the United States, that's as if 136,000 people were laid off in a company in the U.S. So something like, I guess the Amazon essentially would, if these numbers are correct, would be something like 10% of the workforce has been laid off, something like that. Here's another one from Richard. Airlines need programming talent, whether they want it is something else. Actually, we've mentioned this before with the airline industry. Essentially, when they have had these meltdowns in recent times, it's mostly because of digital debt. The basic gist of it is that the airline companies, because they want to please shareholders and profits, these sort of things, and please Wall Street, they sort of kick down the road the investment in upgrading their computer systems. You can refer to this as digital debt, and over time, the debt starts to add up, and eventually the systems are too old. So certainly, I agree, they do need to update all of their systems. I think it was Southwest where they were saying that the way their software worked, they didn't even know where their flight crews were. So that's certainly a problem. So I agree, airlines do need more talent. So these are probably going to be some opportunities for people to move into if they're leaving Google or otherwise. Here's someone else. This is from Glody. Don't underestimate the complexity of InsurTech. We are facing huge challenges in insurance transformations, and AI will help us in more ways than streamlining a submission process. So this was in response to, we had talked about that Allstate was actually really aggressive in going after Google employees. They even put an article in Bloomberg, and I'm sure other companies will do that as well. Because this is the reality, even in a slowdown, if you're a highly sought after worker because you have skills that people need, there will always be someone to hire you, right? Even in slowdowns. In slowdowns, essentially what happens is just the people who are kind of more on the fringe are really at risk, and it's no longer guaranteed to have a job. Not that life ever is like that, but it becomes much more difficult. Also, too, it depends on your network, and if people generally like you, it matters, right? It is true you're just a number, but you still want to be favorable with your coworkers, your boss, etc., because you're more likely to be recommended to someone if someone has a good opinion of you. Here's someone else. Sandra is saying, tech is cyclical. Google will weather the recession, then go on a hiring spree afterwards. And so I do appreciate Sandra. That is true, right? Yes, these things do go in cycles. When are we going to start the next hiring boom again? That's anyone's guess. So one of the things is it depends on your age. So for those of you who are say my age, I'm pushing 50. I lived through the dot-com bubble. I lived through the 0809 crash. I know it can get ugly. So it could be a multi-year thing where it's tough. And this is sort of why on this channel I just emphasize so much, reach out to your network and just sort of maintain relationships with people. You want to always have your ear to the grapevine of opportunities and get a sense of where things are going, because usually the people around you, and also you want to make new friends, et cetera, will let you know what's going on. And that's sort of how jobs are done. Oftentimes for the very best jobs, you are offered it, not necessarily even applying. Someone's like, hey, we're looking for someone. I was referred to, you by someone else. And that's how the game is played. Certainly the people who are being laid off by Google, they're going to have time, because I think they got a very generous severance package, but not everyone is going to be necessarily in that situation. So we're going to continue talking about these things, and I just do these videos to sort of give you guys a general sense of what's happening, why it's happening, what other people are feeling, and also just give you some reassurance that you can do well in this world, but just you got to be prepared for this stuff. And that's why I've been mentioning it to you guys that layoffs are coming. I've been warning you guys, and I wasn't sure entirely what percentage that Google would lay off, but it ended up that they did. So anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on these things. Hopefully this is helpful for you, and I'll catch you in the next video.